Hi guys, today I'm talking with my friend Oliver on the topic of porn, consensual sex. Not too sure exactly where the conversation is going to take us. So Oliver is someone who has a wife and he's a new father, and it's part of the series of opening up about the topic of porn, sex, and making it a dialogue in our society. So thank you so much for being here today with me, Oliver. I know it's a topic that's usually kind of kept behind closed doors or in private, so I really appreciate you being willing to be vulnerable and opening up today a bit about your experience, and hopefully helping others learn too about maybe some of their own experiences and what's happening in the world. So thank you.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. And, thank you for having me. And I want to recognize that, like you, of course, like it's great for each individual of us doing this, but you're really like leading the charge on this. I want to recognize and appreciate you for just stepping up and really tearing down those closed doors.
Thank you. So, do you want to start by letting us know maybe a bit about what your experience with porn was like? Maybe what age you started using it as, and how that kind of affected your life?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'd have to go back to probably around the age of 12, I'm thinking it must have been. And funny enough, it was something that my neighbor friend and I think one other friend of ours, one of them had said like, hey, like I found this like sex stuff, or like he just sort of talked about it. And so I'm gonna turn this on silent. So yeah, so we were three of us in front of a computer, and he showed us this website, and we watched porn, the three of us together. There's no like masturbation. It was literally just like, oh, what is this? And it was primarily just curiosity, right? And so at the time, there was nothing harmful seeming about it. And then I guess over time, started to understand that the purpose of porn was to masturbate or pleasure yourself, which I wouldn't say is necessarily the best term for it. And so over the years, again, because it seemed like it was standard, it was almost normal. It was like recognized by society. It was a topic not talked about, but when it was talked about, it was like, yeah, of course I watch porn, right? It was very like normal. So there was no sense of like guilt from our peers, which is inherently strange once you know like much more about the industry. And so what happened was, as I went into my later teens, like 18, 19, 20, and in early 20s, I started to, especially, so there's a few different things that happened that started to get me to pull back from porn, or want to pull back. So the addiction had basically been set now because it had been like 5, 6, 7 years. And so now the dopamine launching and the serotonin launching from doing this and all that, like it just created a cycle where I definitely got to the point where I was watching porn every single day for quite a while, unfortunately. Not noticing if it had any effect on my day-to-day experience, right? Only until I read Think and Grow Rich, which had a portion about sexual energy and how basically ejaculating gives away a lot of your strength, your power, your innovation, and so on. That was a part of it, but that was still not. It wasn't a very. It wasn't enough to get me to stop. It was enough for me to consider to stop. What really was interesting to me, and that I think is a really important takeaway for people that again might not realize that this is happening, is I noticed that due to porn, I would look at women, especially obviously attractive women, as meat. Like literally, like I felt this sense of like just feeling like I just want to take her and I just want to fuck her. Like, and it was just that was, and I hated that. I hated having looking at a woman who I'm sure is a perfectly amazing human being and all this kind of stuff, like it could be your friend, all that, and then having that lens to look through was bullshit. I really, really hated that. So those were two factors, and then there was a third factor. So Think and Grow Rich and the power of keeping your energy, basically. The savageness of seeing women as meat, which again I think a lot of men do this and probably don't realize. Like they're literally they look at a woman's ass like first thing, right? And I've caught men like literally look at a woman's ass and I'm just like, what is wrong with you? Which again, and then I think to myself, it's not even his fault. It's really like he did the best with what he could and he was influenced and now he's just stuck in the loop. So I get that. And so hopefully these conversations help with people. The third thing was that I realized every single time I would finish during the watching of a porn video, I would be typically flooded with guilt, right? Like a large part of me just felt grows. You know, like you're feeling great, you're peaking, you're getting there, and like you come and it's like, oh my God, it feels so good. And then the moment it's done, you're like, what the hell did I just do? And I guarantee that I'm not the only one, where sometimes you go so far down the rabbit hole of porn that you end up on a video that you watch and ejaculate to, and then you're like, what the fuck did I just watch? How did I just get myself here? Like, what just happened? And so I think that's inherently what happens with porn. Like, the first porn you probably watch is like basic sex, you know, maybe, unless you got unlucky and clicked on something really whack by accident. And then I think what happens is it's just typical human brain, right? Like, as we get used to something that was pleasant, it becomes no longer pleasant, right? It becomes normalized. So inherently you're like, okay, well, how, like, let me explore this other thing and this other thing and this other thing. And then eventually you get into some really, I mean, there's really no end to how crazy pornography can get, right? And so I started going down that hole, and I was really starting to not like what I was watching and enjoying and all that kind of stuff, right? So that was the third thing. And then as I'm sort of going here, I'm sort of realizing more and more, or coming up. The fourth thing, which I think will be the last, is I couldn't help but obviously realize, again, the industry itself, right? These women that are doing this or in this, like you were mentioning, very little to no consent, or acting as though there is none, as though having no consent is sexy in some kind of savage way. And the women who are there, even if they are maybe giving consent, I guarantee it's not from a place of empowerment. I guarantee it's consent from a place of, I need the money. I need to be, this is the only love I can get. This is just some form of shadow that is coming up, and they're showing up in this video to try to satiate that shadow. And so that, again, was like, it's just a natural thing. Like, you got to think to yourself, like, man, if this was your daughter, which it is someone else's daughter, how would you feel about this? Like, do you really feel like an honorable, divine man watching this happen to a woman who could be divine, but is not, because you are feeding the industry for her to be inside of? Like, that is not divine. That is not your highest self as a man. And it's completely counterintuitive to masculine energy. Like, masculine energy and its divinity is about really protecting and creating the space for divine feminine. It's like the complete opposite to watch porn. So I think all those things resulted in me about 3 years ago giving up porn. Right. So I haven't watched nearly any porn over the past 3 years. And to be completely transparent, if I would ever watch porn, it was actually animated porn. And the reason I chose animated is because, again, it completely knocks off most of what I just said, right? There's no real person of it happening. And I'm not saying it's like the be all end all solution. It's still the industry. It's still funneling that energy into the industry. But considering over the past 3 years, it might have been 6 or 7 times. And again, it wasn't with real people. I feel a little bit more comfortable with that. But that's basically where I am now. And it's been months now since I did last at this point. So that's sort of my pornography journey, I guess you could say.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that. I really like that you touched on how it can get more either aggressive or non-consensual the more you watch it. And that's something that in my research I came to find that porn websites, like, the industry is really data driven now, and so of course the porn industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and so they have algorithms that they know what you typically like to watch, and every time they recommend a video to you, it's slightly more graphic, so slightly more extreme, slightly less consensual, like all of the stuff that you're saying, where you end up one day getting to a point where you're just like, what am I even watching? Well, the industry knows that every time you're getting your hit, you kind of need a bit more, and so it kind of ups the ante, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, like, the fact is, it's a drug, right? And it's like any drug. Like, you take a hit of this, next time you need a bit more and a bit more, right? Then next time you find yourself in a ditch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I honor you for recognizing that. And then you mentioned too with Napoleon Hill talking about how ejaculating can, this is like my hand motion, ejaculating.
At least it was expensive.
Yeah. But how it can, because I read that book too, and it was written like 100 years ago or so the language is a little bit different, and I feel like probably a lot of people might kind of pass over that chapter and not fully understand what he's saying, but
For sure.
I wonder how you interpreted that, if you remember exactly kind of how it made you feel or what you got out of that chapter.
Yeah, sure. I think you had a good point about like it's been 100 years, so it's written in a way. And honestly, like I've even had the conversation about that topic with other people, and then they just they bring it too much into like the now, like into how we would perceive sex and these kinds of things and whatnot. But yeah, personally, the way I see it is it's basically that we have. I mean, it shows up every time, especially as a man, right? When we ejaculate, it's like boom, like you just instantly your energy is like whoa kind of thing. Like horniness is typically instantly gone, your energy, you're typically somewhat exhausted. Like at the end of the day, like you're literally giving away the source of life, right? Like that is what it is. You are giving away your seed, which has the power to create life, right? And so in that seed that is still within you, that power to create life, and therefore ideas and solutions and just everything that it takes is like life is just, I mean, it's such a macro topic, it's a macro term. You breathe life into everything that you do, right? You breathe life into your business, you breathe life into your family, like all these kind of things. So when you ejaculate, you are literally like getting rid of your power to breathe life into things because you've now just taken that out of you, right? So my interpretation is just the fact that that's what he's talking about, is that, and in him it's much more focused on sort of like business and all that kind of stuff and success. But I'm saying it permeates into really everything. And so it's the same thing. Like when you ejaculate, you're literally taking away your ability to breathe life into your business, and just throwing it away, kind of thing, right? So unless you're intentionally using it, again, unless it's worth it, like if you're making true consensual love with someone that you love, then it makes a lot more sense that you're doing this, because you're breathing life into that love, that person, that thing, and you're growing that relationship as a result. So it's much more, in my opinion, worth it. Now he kind of says that even then, like, you shouldn't be having sex like every day, kind of thing like that. I think, that's where there's some potential debate and such, because again, he's much more about the success side of things in the more business and financial world. But success to me is obviously like a balance of all things. It's like my relationships, my family, my money, my all this kind of stuff. So if I'm breathing life into my relationship, then that to me is the success I want to breathe my life into.
Right. And I like how you're mentioning sort of what you're breathing that life into. And so you had mentioned earlier when you're kind of breathing that life into porn, like you're enabling that to happen. I really like that you, by saying that, you're taking responsibility and knowing that you're not just like a fly on the wall watching something happen and you have nothing to do with it, but by you tuning in, that's what's feeding it. Same with YouTube. When you're watching certain videos, you're allowing those creators to have money off of it, or to have whatever it is. I mean, a video like this, I'm probably not going to make money because YouTube doesn't allow certain things to be monetized. But I mean, in the porn industry, like, yeah, that your eyes, like you just clicking that button is allowing someone to make money off of what's happening. And like you mentioned too, like
Perpetuated.
Yeah, perpetuated. And in those videos, it's possible that the women haven't given consent. It's possible that they aren't even of age, is what is kind of coming out now too, is there's a lot of child trafficking in the industry, and moderators on the websites can't tell if someone is 18 or not, and they don't get proof of consent before the videos get posted. So yeah, and you mentioned the guilt too, and I think you're right that that's something I've read too with a lot of men that use porn, that there is that sense of guilt afterwards. And I wonder, do you think it's because of the type of content, like you said, that you get down that rabbit hole, or just feeling that energy of what's going on? Or
I mean, at the end of the day, if you look at guilt from a more macro perspective, guilt is basically the result of being out of alignment with your principles, right? Principles and values. Otherwise, why would you feel guilt, right? If it's aligned. And so that really comes down to the individual, because the fact is there are people out there, psychopaths, that would feel no guilt. And it's because their principles and values are completely out of line, that to watch something like this means nothing and has no effect. So if anything, what I'd love to say is that if you are feeling any sense of guilt, it is directly because you are completely out of alignment with your principles and values. And you may not be aware or conscious of what principle and value it's in disalignment with. But that's what it is, right? And that should be a very huge clue for you to let go. Because obviously, like because the problem is and we've all, many of us have pulled a quote, how you do one thing is how you do everything. And it's like, what happens is if you start to practice going into guilt for things, which is again going against your principles and values, if you begin to practice that, it will permeate into other parts of your life, right? You will have decisions to make in your business, your family, or this or that, where your principles and values would tell you to do X, but because you've been literally practicing to go against them and dealing with that, you will start to do that in other places as well. And you'll fall out of alignment in other places of your life. Right. So again, so like why that was happening to me is it just wasn't in alignment. So now again, personally, and this is going to be different per person, depending on those variables. For me, my principles were just the knowing that woman there's a 99% chance that she is not there empowered, right? She's not there, like you said, consent. It's all the things that would make a woman empowered are like, they're just not there for the thing, right? And so that made me feel guilty that, again, it's like, what am I doing watching and encouraging this?
Mm-hmm. And you had mentioned too about how it's kind of the masculine energy when it's balanced. The purpose is to allow the woman to feel safe and empowered. And how would you describe that? Like, how do you think, whether it's maybe that the porn industry changes somehow, or do you think it's more so that people would be better off focusing on the real experience, and how would that look?
Yeah, good question. Layers. So I think like there's one thing that I'm sure you've done your research, so you've probably heard of like ethical porn,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where there is in fact consent, there is in fact a more loving connection between, like, often it's like legitimate couples doing actual sex kind of thing, right? Personally, I haven't dove into that yet myself, because again, I just don't see the need, which is where I'm going to go to on a tangent in a second. But again, I think that's a direction that would be fantastic to take. But again, it's like the porn industry is almost like trying to mess with the pharmaceutical industry. Like, you're talking just crazy levels of lobbying and power that to try to get them to shift from what they see to be the biggest moneymaker to something that, hey, I mean, there's all the potential to do it. Like, if you took the energy from what they're currently doing and you put all that energy into the world of ethical porn, you would probably see just as much success. But again, that shift is so large and hard. And the people that are putting that energy are obviously, I mean, there's no better way to say it. Like, they have to have a toxic or psychotic mind to a certain degree. And again, I wonder to myself, like, how can you be working in that industry and then do you actually go home to family? Like, do you go home to a daughter after you do that? Like, you must all not be that, or be just somewhat completely demented. Like, how do you do that? So that's its own thing.
Hey guys, I just want to make a quick comment on the topic of ethical porn. It's something I meant to touch on in the conversation with Oliver, but the conversation kind of moved in a different direction and I forgot about it. So I just wanted to make a little side note that I think the concept of ethical porn is something that still needs to be debated a little bit on what is actually ethical. I would say that the number one thing would be that all parties involved have given their consent, not only at the time of, but continually. So continued consent, which means that the people involved in creating the video that would be posted online, they have the power and the right to take it down at any time. So anytime that they're no longer consenting to having it online, they need to be able to take it down. So far, the only website that I know that is doing this is called Make Love Not Porn, and that's a website that you need to pay to be able to access the content, because the creators are getting what I understand is a fair pay. I would say there also needs to be legislation and laws in place to protect people around this whole topic as well. If we're going to be having ethical porn, we need to also have laws to protect the people who are in the videos. And so what could happen in something that you might think is ethical porn, it might be that there is a couple that is consensually choosing to have sex, but they might even be making a video for private purposes. And then if one person in the relationship decides to go put it on a porn website and make money off of it, but the other party hasn't consented, there needs to be something in place to both make sure on the website that both parties are consenting, and also that there's laws in place to protect someone if they actually haven't consented. So what revenge porn is when there's a couple who has either made a video together for private purposes, or they've sent nudes or photos, and one person in the relationship, it's typically the man. So if it's a heterosexual couple, it's usually that the woman has given the man naked photos of herself, or they've taken videos during sex that mostly feature her in the video, and the man, after they break up, then goes and uploads it to a website. This is called revenge porn, and this is illegal in most places, but I would say it would need to be illegal everywhere, and especially in the country, if there's going to be ethical porn, there needs to be very stable and steady and aggressive laws against revenge porn. And so certain countries have different laws. I know in Canada it's illegal, and you can go to prison up to 5 years for redistributing any nude. So that's even just texting your friends. If you get a nude from someone and you text it to someone, you could go to jail for up to 5 years for redistributing nudes, whether it's through text messaging, email, social media, or onto websites. And in the US, I think it's punishable up to 2 years in jail for revenge porn. In Australia, it's actually up to 7 years in jail. So I can link some information on this in this video description. There's different articles and court cases that are happening that are determining how much time people spend in jail and what the consequences are. So we absolutely need to be having these laws, especially to protect women. We need to have laws in place that protect people at all times from having any of their personal content, especially if it's a naked image of their body. It can't be allowed to ever be redistributed without that person's consent. Otherwise, that's a form of sexual assault. So it needs to be recognized as such, and that's where the topic of ethical porn, there are so many different caveats that I would say there's a lot that would need to be further discussed on this. Another thing with ethical porn is that right now the legal age to be in porn is 18, and I would even question if that's even ethical, because the human brain doesn't fully develop until age 25, and it's specifically the part of the brain that's able to make rational decisions is not formed until age 25. So people up to age 25 are the most likely to make irrational or impulsive decisions that they later regret. And I wonder if allowing people to choose to be in porn at age 18 is ethical, because it could be argued that it's actually taking advantage of the more naive, undeveloped, immature brain. So this is just where I'm saying that if we're going to start moving more towards ethical porn, I think there needs to be a lot that's taken into consideration to determine if something is considered ethical or not. So that's my little side note, and we'll get back into the conversation. Thank you.
Now, what I've more gone towards is just, again, I choose to channel the energy that I would used to put into porn and channel it into my relationship, right? And focus it much more on making love with my partner and playing around with the things that each of us might want at different times. So we never have the same sex, for example, right? It's very much like, okay, here's what I need and what would serve me in this sexual experience. Here's what I need and what would serve me in my sexual experience. And then we'll always play back and forth and play around with that. And so what's fun about it is, if you have a good sexual relationship with your partner, then you should have a safe container to talk about the things you would like to try and experiment with, which in my experience has satiated any need to go to porn. Because in my sexual relationship, I'm able to express the things that I like to explore, and then 90% of the time experience them. Like, there hasn't really been anything that there's been no consent to. And if so, we usually just explore like why that is. Like, why do I want it and why does she not? And we can talk about that. Right. So I think that, and of course, this is a little bit more difficult if you don't have that partnership, right? So then you might be there standing or listening, asking yourself, well, what if I don't have that partner to do that with, like, at all? Like, I don't even have a partner, right? Then it's definitely more challenging, I guess, because you're going from probably addicted, like I'm sure a lot of people listening would be that addicted state of mind. So again, I'd say either go to the ethical side, look into ethical pornography if you need to, or again, practice a level of like progressive abstinence, right? And really just come off of it and try to really sink into yourself and really ask, like, is this truly serving me? How am I personally losing from this, or how is this a disservice to me? And then of course, is this really serving the world, and how is it potentially a disservice to the world? And really just be brutally honest with yourself. Not easy, but I mean, anything worth doing is not easy, right?
Mm-hmm. And when you were in the process of quitting, did you join any of the communities like NoFap, or was there anything that kind of helped you, or what was kind of your journey with quitting?
I'm not very relatable when it comes to that. I'm very much the kind of person that's like, when it's clear, it's over kind of thing. I'm very good at just being like, cool, I'm just gonna, like, for example, like last month I decided I just wanted to do no alcohol for a month. So I was just like, okay, cool, I'm just gonna do that. Right. In fact, 2 years ago, I decided I was gonna do a year of no alcohol. And I was just like, cool, I'm just gonna do that because I know I can prove it to myself that I can. And I'm just really good at challenging myself and practicing my integrity and practicing my discipline. And so it's kind of the same story where I was just like, no, I have taken the time to lay out all the reasons why I do not want to do this. And so there is no logical or even emotional reason why I should continue to do this. The only thing continuing me to do this is my addiction to it, or the chemical reaction in my brain, which my conscious mind can choose to. I mean, at the end of the day, right, the space between a trigger and a reaction is the opportunity to choose, right? They talk about that in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. There's that middle ground, which is unique to the human race. And so there is nobody who can't just quit. They just don't have the power or the integrity or the discipline or whatever you want to call it to make that decision in the middle of their reaction. All right. So again, I don't think I'm super relatable on that. I don't think a lot of people can do that super, super well. But hey, I mean, I would definitely love to challenge everybody to try to just do it that way, because again, this is one of those things where if you can achieve it in this, imagine how it could spill over into so many other things.
Exactly. And did you notice a difference? Because you had said that before you kind of looked at women or attractive women like a piece of meat that you wanted to fuck. Did you notice that change or?
Significantly? Yeah, it was actually like really satisfying, because like I said, I just hated it. Like I had that sense of like looking at the woman's ass before even looking at her face and everything, and so a lot of that has very much gone away, where I can appreciate her for a woman. And and here's what's also cool, I'm also not shy to still appreciate feminine divinity in the fact that women are beautiful, right? But I no longer look at a woman again as a piece of meat. I can just look at them as a beautiful woman, as a beautiful piece of feminine, or piece of, that sounds weird, but like a beautiful feminine energy, just plain and simple. Like it's in our nature that masculine is attracted to feminine, whether, again, you don't have to be a man to be masculine or vice versa, but that polarity is beautifully attractive. And so what was the other book that I read recently? Way of the Superior Man, right? The Way of the Superior Man, definitely something that your audience should listen to. I mean, it's key to this. He speaks about how there's nothing wrong with, he kind of made it sound like there's like, again, the feminine essence, which is like an actual energy in the air, which as a masculine, you can like inhale, like you can experience it and let it warm and fuzz your body without being freaking like horny for the person, or like want to have that person or need that person. You can just appreciate that feminine energy and let it empower your masculine energy. Right. And so that's much more the perspective I'm coming into seeing women with now, where there was actually a period, and this is even because the first 2 years I'd say was like this, where I would just kind of not feel anything, or I would practice not feel anything towards women in a sexual way, which felt kind of just resistant. And, just again, I appreciate that more than looking at them as a piece of meat, but there was still a sense of like resistance, which I didn't like. So then since this book and seeing it that way, now I'm able to really appreciate a woman for their beauty without that meat or savageness or so on and so forth. So I believe that I've found this really, because again, it doesn't feel resistant anymore. It feels very peaceful to embrace women in this way.
And I love that you said something that you would notice other guys, the way that they would look at women or talk to women. And I feel like one statistic I saw recently was that 81% of women have experienced sexual harassment. And I feel like men that watch porn sometimes are unconsciously sexually harassing women because they just don't understand how to relate to women in a healthy way. And I worked in gyms for a long time, and I remember this one day I was covering someone's shift at a gym I didn't usually work at, and this gym tended to be like really run by men and guys, and so it was a lot of young men in their 20s, and they'd have girls that would come into the gym and all they would do was look at their butts, and then they leave like little notes whenever the women would sign in. These guys would leave notes on their files like nice ass, or like they'd have like nicknames for the women's that would be like based on their bodies. And I remember feeling so uncomfortable, like I didn't even want to be near these men who were just sexually
they're doing it to you.
Yeah, they're just sexually harassing women, and this is like their normal sort of, it's kind of like that bro mentality that I see even in 12-year-olds. Like groups of 12-year-old boys are just going around sexually harassing girls and women, and that's something that I see like a lot of a sense of like being out of alignment with integrity. And that's one of the reasons that this is really important to me too, is just thinking like, if I have kids one day, or like kids that I know in my life, or my nieces, or like there's girls around in the world, and even boys, because I feel like some young girls get into porn too, and then they might be babysitting a boy and sexually harassing him. And so there's just like this sort of distorted view of sex that I feel a lot of people get when they're really watching porn, especially from a young age, because it really shapes their view of the world, and they might not even realize that they're having an unhealthy connection with the opposite sex, or the sex that they're interested in. Of course, it could be male to male, female to female, non-binary to whoever. Like it's just sort of that disconnect from our bodies and ourselves. And one thing that I know, you mentioned just sort of the healthy type of sex that you have with your partner. I think it's important to also maybe recognize that there's probably that level of emotional depth. And I know you guys are both going into the relationship in a conscious way. Like I feel like you guys have a good sense of how to be a conscious couple. And I wonder if you want to talk or explain a bit about maybe how that has to do with how to have a healthy sexual relationship, based on what type of maybe emotional connection you have to even feel safe being vulnerable and talking about that type of stuff.
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic, and it's definitely something that we're nowhere near masters. I think that I mean, that's what's really cool too about conscious sexual partnership, is like there's never a destination, right? Like that's something that's really cool. But where I'd say you want to quote unquote start on this journey is you have to start on where most people are, and where they have been, and where they've been traumatized to be. And so Jess has a really, I think, a relatable experience where she, due to porn, and a lot due to porn, she believed she had to show up a certain way in sex. She believed that she had to moan in a certain way, or this much. She believed that she needed to, like, there's all these different things, right? And she believed that what she was watching was real, because of course, as we know, like most of, well, not necessarily of course as we know, but as you and I know, most of pornography and the experience of the woman is not the way she's displaying it to be whatsoever. She is not actually moaning because she's actually liking it. She's in fact most likely in pain. And so that was the same thing with Jess, is that she would go into sex the same way that they would in porn, which was like, right into it. And she would feel pain, like all the time, literally every time. And so she believed that pain was just it was just part of it, right? It was just, this is what it means to have sex, is you receive the cock and it hurts. And maybe sometimes it feels good, maybe over time it feels good, or something like that, but that's what it's going to be. And so basically her primary goal would be to like basically just please the men, which, because again, that's a lot of what porn has said and shown. It's like, it's really basically like serve the man. And so as she had her own, and again, like I, to a degree, like I never realized that I never intended to hurt the woman that I was having sex with, of course, right? Because again, like, how do we know? Like, if the woman is moaning and she's getting wet, and there's all these things that, to our knowledge, is what it means to feel good sexually, I'm going to keep doing it, right? And so it's only until we started having much more open conversations about it, which again, this comes down to, you need to have a container of no judgment within the relationship, where it's like, as someone expresses something to you, don't judge them for their expression. You still see them in their highest light. And so she began to have the courage to speak up and about how, like, hey, this hurts, like this hurts. And so what we did to begin to move out of that world is I just really submitted to listening to her and creating the space where she felt safe to be heard about her experience during and after, I should say. And so again, usually what happens is, like, they have, you guys have sex, that's kind of it, and you don't really talk about it. Maybe you talk about something that you liked or you did. But what we do then and still now to this day is during sex we communicate a lot, right? Well, she'll express what it is that she wants, which again, this is probably the most challenging thing for a woman, is to express what she wants, especially in the middle of sex, because again, we're programmed to think that it's just about the man and his pleasure. It is so hard for women to speak up in the middle of it, and instead choose to bite their lip and take it, basically, right? And so what she's gotten better at, and has taken a long time, is actually expressing like, hey, you know what, that's too fast, please slow down. And in the beginning, how it actually happened, which is where my speaking up came in as well, is when it started to hurt, and because I was going too fast, like that, she would just like push me off, like completely, right? Like pull me out, like game over. And of course, for me, that's hugely disempowering. I would usually lose my heart over the next few seconds or something like that, because it was just so not the way that I like it. So again, now we come back to that question of, okay, well, how can we make this experience work? And so over time, me bringing up that, hey, I really don't like it when you just push me out. Like, I feel like I'm a bad guy when you do that, right? I feel like I am raping you. Like, this is not right. But again, she doesn't want me to just keep going. So naturally, we figured out that it's like, okay, well, when she wants, like when it's going too fast, we just need to focus on either slowing down drastically, typically like to half, 50% or less, or completely stopping, but keeping me inside, right? And so that was really important, because then that way we still keep up the sexual healthy tension. But I am now listening to her and her body and her needs and what she needs to be able to continue to move on. And so there are many times where we'll stop, slow down, whatever. Maybe I'll pull out, but I'll pull out from a consent of both of us, to then go into either back into foreplay or this and that or whatever, depending on what's needed in the moment. And then through that experience, because basically what the man needs to try to do is open up the woman to receive, right? Because women's yoni or vagina or whatever you want to call it, it's like their most sacred place, right? You are literally penetrating into their soul and into their being, their spirit, their existence, like everything. And so to allow that to happen is not easy for a woman. Like, and it will never be truly easy. Or maybe eventually, when you're like in your pure divinity and you have found your pure divine, twin flame man, and you have reached that level of nirvana, you can probably do that with each other. Which in all honesty, her and I have gotten much better at. But your goal as the man is to create enough of a safe space such that they can feel like they can surrender into receiving it, right? And so that's been our practice, and whatever it takes to get there, because again, the woman experience is also very different every time. Like the man, it's like we can just, and it's going to feel good the same way every time. But for a woman, it's like sometimes the clitoris is what's really active in the now. Sometimes it's really just making out. Sometimes it's the nipples. Sometimes it's like all these kinds of things. So as a man, we need to sort of really be there, listen to the body, listen to the way that she is reacting to all the touches that you're making, and performing, and seek to, again, support that safe space for them to surrender to you. And then that's when you really reach that most beautiful version of sex, which is when she has finally gotten to the cusp of and is in the mode of surrendering. Then you can have like this most beautiful synchronized sex where your breaths often will align even naturally, actually will align naturally if you're truly in this state. You will, like, your bodies will move, like you truly become one at that point, right? And then that's when having a simultaneous ejaculation is almost guaranteed to a degree. So that's been our experience of going from, again, she thought it was mandatory, like it just pain was normal and it's about serving the man, to now we serve each other, listen to each other, and create the space for each other to really show up as ourselves with each other, and trying to create that like safe container for true sex.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for opening up to that, and thank you to Jess, who's not here, who just had kind of her sex life exposed. So hopefully she's okay with that.
She does it herself as well.
Okay, so we'll double check it just to make sure that she's okay with that going on.
No, 100%. She talks about it as well. She's on board with this, like, because her whole thing is she's actually in the middle of creating a feminine worthiness program. Awesome. Where she's going to talk about these topics. It is going to be a part of it. definitely something you'd want to talk to her about too, because like it's probably very aligned with your mission. So she's in the middle of creating something where this will be part of the topics. Like literally, she wants to have because it's a group program. She wants to have a part of it where all the women in the program, they come and they show up braless, all the women, so that they can just truly show up for each other and love each other for who they are, and not literally because of porn. Because in porn we see perfect tits, perfect pussy, perfect ass every time, and it's like, yes, but most of those are surgically done, or again, they're just handpicked by these producers because that's exactly what they want to put into there. And so she wants to really bring the power back to the women to say like, hey, it's not about comparing yourself to them, but it's about truly just loving you and yourself and what you have, and what it is divine.
That's awesome. The visual I got when you were describing that was kind of how we see like vegetables in stores too. And when you get into organic ones or even fruit, like they're all kind of shaped differently. Like you might get strawberries that aren't just the perfect strawberry, but when you're going organic, you might have some where it's kind of like two strawberries together. They have like different shapes, and all those veggies, like nothing looks perfect when it's organic and natural. So I love that, just appreciating the natural organicness of ourselves and the world around us. And I love that you talked about how important it is to listen to the woman and what the woman wants in her body. And I feel like in an ideal world where people are more in balance and in alignment with themselves, that is what I see what sex is what you were saying, like opening up that yoni or the vagina, or kind of having that sacred experience, which really I feel has been kind of taken away in our society, where children are seeing hardcore aggressive porn from age 10, 11, 12, and thinking that that's what it is, both for the men and for the women. I know a lot of women that would relate to what you said, probably most women, if not all women who've watched porn. That's what we're taught in porn, is kind of the objective is to get the man off. And you don't see sort of what happens behind the scenes, where even for a woman to be able to have the type of sex that's being had, she's either one, being raped and it's not consensual and it's just hurting her in the scene. Or two, if it is done in a bit more of an ethical way, she typically is doing a lot for maybe like a half hour of foreplay, whether it's with herself or just to kind of open herself up to be able to get into that scene. But that's something that we don't see off camera. And so a lot of people just don't understand. And that's one of the reasons I've never been drawn to porn, is that I know the majority of women, the way that we feel aroused is through the clitoris being stimulated, and you don't see that nearly enough in porn. Like it can take sometimes like minutes and like a long time of like clitoral stimulation for a woman to actually open up in a way where sex is enjoyable. And that's something that like we aren't even taught. Like I first watched porn as a teenager as well, and I didn't even know what the clit was until like years after that. And so that's just something that we're just so disconnected as a society, I think, from what like healthy, natural, empowering for the woman sex is. And I think when women are empowered, it also empowers men too, because I don't think like at the core, they would really feel empowered by just attacking and aggressing someone. Like that's a very like low level sort of demonic level of empowerment, I would think. Like you have to be pretty like screwed up in the head to get empowered by like abusing people, which is essentially what's happening in a lot of porn scenes.
Yeah. And it's tough to actually say that as an absolute statement, because at the end of the day, our perspective is only that which we've experienced. And it's like, again, if we've like, not only is it that if in the porn world, we're seeing that happen and it looks like it's enjoyable, but then we actually go out and do it. And because again, women don't know how to show up in the way that they actually would like to, and they think, like you said, it's about getting off the man and everything. If the man is doing these aggressive things and so on and so forth, and the woman is responding in a way that sounds pleasant, in a way that makes you think, and that she even will say that it's pleasant, although again, she doesn't truly feel that, she's just not expressing it. Like, what is a man to do? Like, right? So it's very, very difficult. It's very difficult on both sides. Like the women need to speak up more to their men, and then the men need to listen more. That's really what it is. This isn't one or the other. This is a collaborative effort on both ends.
And I guess it also brings up the point, like maybe that's kind of judgmental of me to say it's like demonic to enjoy the pain. I know that there is like that kink of like the S&M, like some people really actually.
And as long as it's consensual on both sides, then that's perfectly fine. As long as they're having that true communication of like, hey, I actually do like it when you like whip me or bite me or this or that or whatever. Yeah, people have their thing, and that's what it's about, is trying to find that sexual match. And like I said much earlier, right, it's about talking about these things you'd like to experiment with, exploring again, why do you want it, why did they not want it, if that's the case, or if it is what you want, then how do you create the safe space to actually do it together and experiment that way. And that's totally fine, but again, it comes down to that authentic communication on both ends.
Yeah, from my experience, I feel like the people that I know who are more into that as well typically have had some form of a sexual trauma, and it's almost a way for them to kind of take the power back and like replay certain things. And so I would say also to be careful, like if you are in the kink world and like interested in S&M, that there could actually be some underlying trauma that there might be a healthier way and then a more like empowering and wholesome way to actually heal what's at the root of it. But again, I'm not going to judge anyone's journey.
Well, I would definitely agree, because it's for sure that like, and this comes still back to what I said earlier, is like when you're wanting to communicate an experimentation of some kind, don't just question like why that other person doesn't want to, but really again, question why you want to. Like, where is that coming from? Why is it that you're looking to experiment with that? And that's a good point. I didn't even think of it to that level of depth. That a lot of the time, I mean, it's kind of what the 50 Shades of Grey movie is all about. Not that I'm like, that's what's wrong with the guy, is that he was as like a kid or something taken on by a woman, and then he basically took that experience and wanted to project it onto someone else. It's an extreme example, but at the same time, that's happening on more micro or different levels.
Definitely. I think it's actually more common than a lot of people realize, just sexual trauma in general. I'm just hearing the train in the background.
Oh yeah. Let me actually close the window real quick.
Oh, it's okay though. It's okay.
It's quite violent.
Okay.
There you go.
Thanks.
I'm surprised we haven't heard babies yet, actually, Jess.
Yeah, but so I don't know what the trajectory of that was. Just that, I think that sexual trauma is actually a lot more common than people realize, and they might be either suppressing it or repressing it, or maybe just not comfortable opening up to everybody about it. And so I think being like acknowledging, and I think that's why consent is especially important, because you have no idea what the other person may have been through, and when you're connecting at that level, you could be re-traumatizing them too. And so just having that open communication, and I think even just if people understand that it's important to feel comfortable and safe communicating, and maybe not just unconsciously going straight into sex, which is almost what we're kind of taught as a society. And I feel like it's almost part of like, we're almost taught as women now that like, well, there's slut shaming, and so to not have slut shaming, we need to be empowered to have promiscuous sex. And like, so there's such a strange like dialogue where I feel like sex was so repressed for so many years that it's almost like it's becoming like so overly exerted, and people just don't understand what's healthy, what's safe. And so I think just having a dialogue in general is important. So I appreciate you having this dialogue today.
Yeah, I mean, I think 99% of problems between two people is just how well you guys can communicate about it. They can pretty much all be solved just by that, having those hard conversations.
Yep. Well, I feel like we touched on a lot of stuff. I feel happy with, is there anything that you wanted to add, or?
Yeah, I guess if I had to like leave some sort of finishing words, I'd say like, this is a practice. This is a mastery. This is a, like, to take on, like I said at the beginning, there's no destination, but it is a journey. And the starting point is where you are now, and to not beat yourself up for where you are or where you've been, but to create the consciousness to know that this is where you are and to now move forward from here. And that, like any practice, you'll fail and probably fail again, and so on and so forth. And it's about not beating yourself up as you do that, and really just questioning like, hey, why did I fail? Why did that happen? And then what can I change in my environment to change that, to get to where I want to be, sort of thing, right? Just take it easy. And I promise there is definitely, like I said, there's no clear destination, but it gets very good in very many ways.
Thank you. And you're actually reminding me again of something that I thought of before, was how you're explaining sex as more of a way of understanding maybe certain things hurt, certain things feel good, understanding with that person how to do it. I could imagine that someone who's just watching porn every day and jerking off to it, that's the easier route. And so that's how
Sure.
our brain actually gets accustomed to, well, that sounds really challenging and difficult, and that doesn't sound super fun to me, like, because I'm watching porn every day, and that, like, the
And I'm
brain
getting what I think is what I would get from that other thing. But this
yeah.
definitely, it's very different. It's a very, very different experience, a different organ. Because here's what's also beautiful, again, especially if you're doing this with a partner that you're in a relationship with, is especially for the woman, this permeates into the rest of her life, which then permeates into yours. Like when Jess and I have good, powerful, loving sex, it very much affects everything else in our life. So there's way more value to taking on this journey than just getting off.
Do you want to share what maybe some of those things are, just so people understand too, like, especially
Sure,
people
right.
trying to get away from it, like, what is sort of that, what can I get out of it, I guess?
Yeah, right, for sure. So one of the thing that's coming like up right now for me is there are often times where there are times where Jess is, you know, bottling up emotion and tapping into masculine energy to just go, 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 and then she'll bottle up emotion. And so what'll happen is we'll actually use sex as an opportunity for her to release all of that. And so while she's in that masculine bottling up all that emotion, all that, our conversations suck during the like throughout the day. You know, it's very like sharp, quick, aggressive, like sarcastic. Like it's just not nice to be in each other's space. And so when we can then have that proper sex that actually releases, like literally releases those emotions, like there's a multitude of times where during sex she will cry, right? And I will create the space where that's safe for her to do, because it's nothing to do with, she's not crying from pain with me or anything. That's not what we're creating. She's crying from releasing emotions that she's been bottling up. And so my cock is sort of literally going in to penetrate and open that for her. And so once we finish those experiences, she's like a whole new person, right? Our communication is clean again. We don't feel triggered as much anymore. We are smiling and laughing and making jokes as much more. We're tapping each other's butts. We're kissing each other more. Like there's just the entire environment changes to such a degree that it's ridiculous. Like you can feel it in the air, sort of thing.
I love how you're mentioning that it can be a really healing experience too.
100%. She said it herself countless times that our sex has healed so much of her in the world of sex, but also just in many other places as well. And inherently has done the same for me.
And I could imagine that would be also from her just feeling safe and feeling like maybe if she'd been kind of programmed in society that like man's pleasure is important and just focusing on that, whereas now she might be feeling more safe and open to be held and to be herself and to be comforted. And so I could see that being good, and that probably makes you feel good about yourself too, knowing that you're helping her, right?
I mean, that's empowering as masculine divinity. Like that's really like, that's one of our primary goals is, again, to create that safe space for the feminine. And there's no better way to do that than through like proper sexual experiences like that. So for sure on my end, I just feel great myself as well. And again, it's like, I don't leave that ejaculatory experience with any kind of guilt or any kind of like, I'm a lot less exhausted or anything like that. And like I said, because I'm breathing that life into her, it just feels like it's gone to a good place, I think.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Is there anything else? I'm just like, oh, I don't want to leave. It's such a good, like, it's such a good topic that we need to talk more about. But yeah, I'm happy with the conversation if you are.
Yeah. No, I think I feel complete. I guess all I'd say is that like, hey, maybe you're not, like, again, it's a tough topic. So if you feel you need support in going through this, like I'm super open to these conversations. You can definitely reach out to me, Oliver Wolf on Facebook. And I'd love to have these discussions if there's any way I can support you through this journey.
Sounds good. So Oliver is a coach. You're mostly a business coach though, right? Or maybe you want to just describe a little bit about what you do or how you can be of service?
Yeah, I mean, real quick, actually, since last time we've spoken, I've had a lot change, right? So I had the twins, right? And so because of the twins, I actually decided to take a break from the entrepreneur world and find something more steady. So I got myself a job as a project manager at a global manufacturing company. And I did that for over a year now, and actually only recently, like literally a week ago, quit that to jump back into the entrepreneurial realm, where what I'm coming in as is a COO of a startup sales agency, where in a nutshell, basically what we do is we support coaches by having a sales team in place to take on all the leads that are probably overwhelming you, that you have, as a coach, have to like do the sales calls. And like basically as a coach, you should be coaching, right? And so we're trying to take away the whole sales aspect from you, and then you just pay us basically a commission. And we actually, what makes it like a fantastic package is that we mark up your package cost and just take that markup, so that you basically have little to no cost working with us. So if you have a $5,000 package, we'll sell it for 5,500. We take the 500, and you didn't lose anything, right? So in a nutshell, that's what we're working on.
Awesome. Okay, perfect. So thank you for sharing your contact, your Facebook. People know where to find you. Check the description if you need to find Oliver. And thank you so much, Oliver, for being here and being present today and sharing your light.
Pleasure. Totally. Thank you for, like I said, thank you for hosting this and having the courage to speak up about this.
Thank you. And thank you guys so much for watching today. And make sure to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe for more, and I'll see you next time. May you be happy, healthy, and free. Bye.